Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
My co-host, Dan Perkins, is on assignment. But today we have Andrea Simon, partner and member of the SAMC Professional Consulting Group, and is here to tell us how we can build a customer base. Andy, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
Before we go further, tell our audience a little bit about your background.
Sure. I've really been an entrepreneur both inside and outside of a company for most of my life. I started in corporate America, but I actually launched the consumer products division of L'Oreal. And then I eventually got hired by Citicorp when they were launching their electronic banking, and then went from there to run a couple of divisions of Bankers Trust in the private clients group. But at the same time, I formed a company that actually was in the educational testing business and ran the finances at night, and then I took over the company in 1994, and that company builds summative assessments for states. So they're the high-stakes assessments in the K through 12 space, and eventually built the company up. We had 14 states as clients. I retired as the chairman and CEO, and we sold that business to ETS last year for a lot of money. But when I retired as the chairman in 2011, what I did was I joined my wife's company because we had always talked about business forever, and consequently, it was a time to do something else. So I'm having a lot of fun and continuing to build businesses.
Well, what is SAMC?
It stands for Simon Associates Management Consultants.
Okay, clever. But
and
now...
we do several things. First, we're blue ocean strategists, so we help organizations innovate and change because as the world is changing very quickly now, and consequently, if you're not changing, you're in a lot of trouble. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is we help organizations with culture. Because cultures are changing, companies are changing, and you've got to make sure that your culture is aligned with, or it's consistent across everybody in the organization. And then finally, we have a digital marketing division because we found that when we helped organizations or clients with strategy, they weren't sure how to implement that. So we have a division that helps organizations in the digital marketing area.
You've been busy.
Hey, listen, if you don't keep moving, you'll seize up, right?
Yeah, that's very true. But now, Andy, and your website for people?
Is www.simonassociates.net.
Okay. Now, having said all that, how do you build a customer base?
Well, it's very interesting. Let me talk a little about how I feel about building a customer base, and that's within the context of somebody's capabilities today. It's all about personalization. So everything I say beyond this assumes that you're building a customer base with personalization. And I actually thought about this, and what I did was looked up personalized marketing in Wikipedia. And in Wikipedia, it says personalized marketing or one-to-one marketing is a marketing strategy by which companies leverage data and digital technology to deliver individual messages and produce offerings to current or prospective customers. So when I talk about building a customer base, you really have to think about that within the context of personalized marketing. So let me make a few points about building a customer base. I think building a customer base is more than just collecting names and email addresses. It really, requires you thinking strategically. You need to think about the parameters of your base or your potential base. I think you need to be careful to make sure that your base is neither too broad or too narrow. And what we talk about, and this comes out of what we're doing in digital marketing, you need to build a persona. And a persona is really a semi-fictional description of your customer or your potential customer. What does she or he look like from a demographic point of view? What are his or her interests? What does this person like or dislike? And what are his or her pain points? And I think understanding pain points is very important because that allows you to catch their attention when you're communicating to them. And that should really apply to either a product or a service that you want to sell them. And one of the reasons why I was successful in building our educational testing company was when I went in to see the commissioners of education in states, I didn't try to sell them a product. What I did was I said to them, what keeps you up at night? What do you worry about? Because if we can solve those problems, then we have a long-term customer. So it's really understanding those pain points. So let me just double back now to what I said about too narrow or too wide a base. If you set your customer base too narrow, two things can happen. The first thing that can happen is even if you could attract everybody in this narrow segment, you might not have enough customers to make a go of it, to have a viable business, to have an adequate return on investment. And equally important, if you're very narrow, you could end up eliminating people who don't think that they have a problem, but they really do because you haven't given yourself enough time to nurture those people and turn them from non-users to users. I want to talk about something for a minute. When I was running a proprietary drug marketing company, we always used to say that what you really have to do is first create the problem or the disease and make people aware of it, and then offer the cure or solution to them, because suddenly they've discovered that they're not unique. They're part of a group and they really are suffering, or they do have a need that they really didn't think about before that. And let me just talk about being too wide. If your customer base is too wide, everybody has budget limitations. And if it's too wide, you don't have enough funding to reach those people with adequate frequency, so you really have a diluted effort. So, hopefully what I've done is covered why you really need to think about that customer base and make sure that it's spot on and it's well defined and it's neither too narrow and too wide. The second part of building a customer base is really nurturing that base or nurturing that audience. You know, wouldn't it be great if everybody really bought your product or service based upon an initial exposure? That's nice, but we all know that that's not the case. So I think that what you really have to do is you have to nurture people from the awareness stage and nurture them so all of a sudden they become purchasers of your product. They move through that continuum from being aware of the product, being aware of the unmet need, all the way through so they're purchases. And then finally, the last part of it is what you really want to do is you want to continue to reinforce your message to current customers, because you really want them to be ambassadors for the future. I mean, that really makes a lot of sense. In today's day and age, you can Google anything and you can find out whether you have people who are advocates for your product or adversaries for your product. So that nurturing is very important. So I think that, I've covered, 2 points that I want to make, which is really defining your target and understanding how you can move them through the process so that they become purchases. But there's really a third hurdle.
Andy, before you go further, we're talking about Andy Simon, partner and a member of the SAMC Professional Consulting Group. Andy, your website for our audience, because it's so fascinating, but I want to get in where you are and who you are.
Sure. Our website is www.simonassociates.net. Okay,
and if people want to reach you, how do they do it, Andy?
You can go on our website and click on information at simonassociates.net, and we'll get that information and we'll respond quickly.
Okay. Now go to your third point.
Okay. So I talked about defining the target, and I talked about moving them through in a process. But there's really a third hurdle which I think is important, and everybody, I think everybody who has confronted the issues of building a database understands what I'm talking about. And it's really, how are you going to store this information and manipulate this information so you can use it in a meaningful way? Years ago, I think that was very difficult, and everybody built their own CRMs or customer bases, but not anymore. There are a lot of proprietary systems that are available to purchase. Simon Associates is actually a HubSpot agency. HubSpot has a platform that allows me to manage my CRM, my website, my content, my social media, and I can manage using the same platform all my emails that are going out to my customer base. So, if you think back in terms of what I've said, you can remember that I started off talking about personalization. You got to craft a message to everyone in your customer base, but this customer base or this new system allows you to individualize that message so that you can actually nurture people. So HubSpot has become my tool for personalization, and it's an easy tool because I don't have to worry about exporting data from multiple sources. So if you think about a sales and marketing function and having it all stitched together, HubSpot does it well. So I guess in summary, if you go back to the original question at hand, is building a customer base essential? You bet. Because the key that you need to, and that's the key you need to ask yourself. If you build it, what are you going to do with it? And hopefully I've provided a little bit of insight in this area.
Oh, you've done a tremendous job, but now we made my time easy here on the program. I guess my question is, from your experience, and again, our audience is small business, what are some of the tricks or suggestions you make to a small business who's out there trying to build a customer base and perhaps doesn't have as many resources to do what you're asking, you suggest they do?
Well, I'm not sure that, we have we have middle market companies that we work with, and we have found that the cost of acquiring or leasing, or however you want to define it, these systems is not terribly expensive. And if you think about the type of work that you have to do if you're doing this without the advantage of a platform, I think that the return on investment is pretty doggone good. The only thing that I would suggest, though, is if you're going to do this as a small business person, you really have to make a commitment to learn the system and then use it all the time. You just can't buy something, put it on the shelf, and then walk away from it and think that it's going to do something for you. So you really have to spend enough time learning the system to be able to use it.
Do you think older people like myself could make the adjustment, or should they be perhaps training younger people who have grown up with some of these tools?
Well, you know something. I'm 110 years old, and I've managed to learn this. I think that, and I've talked about this in other with other interviewers. The world is changing so quickly that if you can't keep up, I think you're in trouble. This is, if you read Tom Friedman's book on Thank You for Being Late, he talks about the fact that the speed of change is so rapid that you need to be a lifelong learner. So it's fine to turn it over to somebody, but if you don't understand it from a conceptual point of view, and if you can't play with it to understand the value of it or the value of a customer base and what you can get out of a customer base, I think you're missing an opportunity.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm only 100 years old, but I agree with you.
See, so, but it all equalizes when we get to that point, right?
That's true. But I'm just listening to you, and we're talking. Well, let's go a little further.
Sure.
And talk about something. There are more small businesses available for sale today than at any time in the last 10 years, because there are a whole generation of small business owners whose children don't want to go into the business, and they have no clear succession lines, and they'd like to take it out. As an active person in second or third, even fourth career, it seems, what do you say to these individuals? Someone said to me recently that they don't realize that once they leave, they'll crave doing another business because they'll not be able to change their habits. What do you say to these people?
Well, I think, what do I say to the people in terms of selling their business, or what do I say to them in terms of going into another business?
Well, really,
or would you like me to cover both?
Well, cover both of them. I'm just curious. You just sound
well,
like the type of person.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think on one side, nobody likes to hear this, but the business that you might have been in might be passing you by, or might be passing viability by. Consumer habits change over time. Consequently, you have large box stores and you have empty stores on Main Street. The internet sells a lot of stuff that we used to traditionally go into to purchase in a retail store. So there are a lot of things. So I think the first thing that you have to ask yourself is, if I'm in a business and I don't have anybody in the next generation who's interested in going into that business, or even if they are, will that business be viable in the next 20 years? Now, that doesn't suggest that it didn't offer a tremendous living for the individual who's running the business, but is it peaking and is it going downhill? So that's on one side. On the other side, if I'm retiring from one business and going into another business, there are a number of questions that you have to ask. One, do I have the energy to do this anymore? Or if I'm doing this to occupy time? Because based upon your answer to that, you either you've got to make some decisions. Are you going to do a startup which requires 12 hours a day, or do you want a part-time job that occupies some of your time and you can play golf the rest of the time? The second thing is, and I talked about this before, are you a lifetime learner? Because things are happening so rapidly that if you can't keep up with technology, you're really at a disadvantage. And I'm sure you find the same thing. So I think that's very important. And finally, the last thing, but the other question you have is, geez, if I'm selling this business, if I'm retiring from this business, if I'm starting another business, what is this going to do from a resource point of view? Do I want to take some of my retirement money and invest in something? And, what are the risks associated with that? Because at 65, you don't want to find out you've run out of money because you've invested in a faulty venture. And then finally, I tell people that millennials behave very differently than boomers. So, and millennials are not going to change for you. You're going to have to change for millennials, and consequently, you're going to have to adjust to their behavior. They text a lot. They don't take smoke breaks, but they like to play ping pong. There are a lot of very different things, and if you're not sure that you can adapt to them, then I think you're going to be in trouble.
That's wise words. I also meant it in the sense, I have a friend of mine who keeps working only because he has no outside interest outside of work. And I often wonder myself what I would do if I stopped working. I want to do it, but every time I think about it, I get scared. But and you just look like a man that just, when one thing ends, you start something new.
Well, I've been very fortunate. I like working. I like the competitive nature of trying to build businesses. I like learning different things. I belong to a golf club, but how many days a week can I play golf? And so and I've still got a lot of energy. So yeah, everybody is very different. I had another friend who was very successful in the advertising business. He had a goal of retiring at 55, and he's now 70 some odd, and he's very happy. So it's really an individual decision. But I think you have to be honest with yourself.
How many of us really are honest with ourselves?
Well, I can't speak for anybody else, but I like what I do, and I wouldn't want to be sitting around.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Andy Simon. Andy, your website again and how people can reach you?
Sure, it's www.simonassociates.net. There's a just click on info at Simon Associates, and you can send us an email. Be glad to talk to you.
Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. We've been talking with Andy Simon. A website link will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future program. And you can also tell us guests you might like to hear through our survey. Andy, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a really illuminating time.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Have a good day.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Dan Perkins here from recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Welcome back to Recalculating, the program dedicated to American small business. Now it's time to bring together our two experts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella, as they discuss things that are happening now that are affecting your business success.
My co-host, Dan Perkins, is on assignment. But we are lucky today to be talking with Martyn Lewis about why customers buy and how small businesses can better present their offerings. And during this broadcast, we're also going to talk about a very unusual aspect to what's happened to Martyn recently. But Martyn, first, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here, Don. Thank you.
Martyn, tell us first a little bit about yourself personally before we go any further.
Well, what should I do? I'll start with the accent then, Don. So my first life was in England. So I was brought up and educated and started off my career in England, then moved to Canada. I'm proudly Canadian. Spent 18 years in Canada. During the 80s, I was in sales. That was my first foray into sales in 1981. Then I moved from sales into marketing, back as a sales manager for one of the largest high technology companies in the world. I ended up being vice president of marketing and sales services for that company. Then I became CEO of Drake International for North America, where I had several hundred salespeople working for me. After doing the CEO role for 3 years, I decided that if I was willing to work that hard and be on that many planes and that many hours a week, I'd rather do it for myself than somebody else. And so I started Market Partners, my company, 22 years ago. And Market Partners, I started that company with a vision of really bringing more, what should I say, process analysis. So those are pretty heavy words, but more kind of precision into sales and marketing. And since then, we've worked with companies, 17 countries across the world. We've worked with about 85,000 salespeople. And essentially, my life is working with sales, marketing folk, and CEOs and entrepreneurs.
That's exciting. The name of your book is, and I love the title, How Customers Buy and Why They Don't. And boy, I've had a lot of experience in that as well. So tell us how you came to write the book first.
Well, it's always been a passion of mine that I guess it's a very logical thing to think about, and yet maybe kind of very insightful as well. That if you're really selling hard, the secret to success is to have somebody equally engaged with you that's buying hard. Because you can sell hard, and unless somebody's buying hard, nothing's going to happen. So it always intrigued me as what is my customer going through? How are they buying? And then when we started Market Partners, one of the things we did immediately was when we were working with organizations, talk to their customers. So we talked to our customers' customers. It's really interesting because we found that our customers had good offerings. We've worked with but very, very few companies that don't have really good products and services that they're bringing to the marketplace. And in many cases, they've got salespeople that are working hard. Or if it's a small business, the owner may be working very hard at sales and marketing, out there spending a lot of energy. But are people buying? So we went behind the scenes and we talked to our customers' customers about how they're buying, what's going on in their mind, when they're going to buy, why they would buy, and what would hold them up, what would be the friction. And what we discovered is that what's going on behind the curtain, the other side of the wall on the buying side, is very different to what people perceive. So that's really what led to the book. We've now talked to over 2,000 people about how they buy. A number of years ago, we realized that we had a body of work that we could decode what we call the buying DNA. So what is the buying DNA of a particular market? How do they buy? Who gets involved? What do they think? How do they make their decisions? What could stop them from buying? And we saw that you can actually map that out for a particular market, because buyers within a particular market buy in remarkably similar ways. So you can map that out and you can start to look at how a customer is going to buy and why they may not.
Wow. I wish I'd had you years ago. But let's start. Let's pick an industry that you're familiar with, and let's go into a deep dive on that. I'd love to talk about the advertising industry. Can we talk about that? Are you talking
Absolutely.
about that?
Don,
okay.
I'll talk about anything, really.
Well, in my instance, we are both a podcast and an over-the-air program. And in the podcast industry, the view is if you don't have 5,000 downloads, they won't consider you for advertising. And if in the over-the-air industry, if you don't have some sort of measurement, they won't consider you. So since we're in a hybrid, we have the problem of convincing our audience. But to me, the greater issue is when I finally get to someone, getting them to trying to identify why they said no. The easy answer is we don't have 5,000 downloads. Well, I now have 5,000 downloads for every show. But would you want to address that, Martyn?
Absolutely. It's fascinating. You know, It's interesting. We call them sometimes objections of convenience. So people say, well, you don't have 5,000 downloads, or your price is too high, or whatever. Those are things that they can throw out there that you can't argue with. So they can stall you out and get rid of you, essentially, by throwing out an objection of convenience. Is it the real issue? Is it what's really stopping the buyer buy? And many, many times it is not. They're just using that as a convenient way to put up a block. What's really going on in their mind? You know, one of the big things is we call it implications. What are the implications if I actually started working with you versus somebody else? What are the implications? Does it mean that as the buyer, if I started to use you to advertise, does that mean that I'm going to turn somebody else off? Does it mean that I have to go to somebody else and say, I'm actually going to move away from you and move to this other channel? So that people are not going to tell you they're fearful of that. But that's a very big fear that stops people moving because they don't want to fire the incumbent. They don't want to tell people that they're moving on. They also may change. Change is a huge thing. Everybody says that they love change. They don't. People don't like change. Status quo bias is massive. So people will tend to go on doing what they've always done unless there's one heck of a compelling reason not to. And in today's world, where we've seen people are inundated with things to do, people don't have time, people don't have money, everybody's fighting for their attention. It's so easy to stay with what you do. So yes, you may be offering somebody a better product, a better place for them to do advertising, but they'll just go on with what they're doing because that's where they're comfortable. They don't want to change. So those are some ideas.
Well, it's certainly a starting point, but also what really bothers me, I was brought up in a world of politeness, but they don't return your call. You know, or you make a presentation and you never hear from them again. What do you do in a case like that?
Well, first of all, don't take it personally.
I'm sorry?
You're quite right. Don't take it personally. You're right. We were brought up. Good. We were brought up in that environment where it's polite to return calls. Now, a friend of mine is a CFO for $1 billion company, and he said to me about sales, he said that he used to, a number of years ago, always get back to people that had contacted him. He'd say, no, we're not interested at this time. But he said, we have so many people trying to get our attention every day. He said, there's just no way we can look at it. And he actually said some of them have probably got great ideas, but there's just no way that we could take the time to talk to everybody. So he said, unfortunately, we don't even return phone calls. We don't follow up because we just can't do it. We're so inundated. So that's the world that we're working in. The first thing to do is not take it personally. The second thing to do is to accept that that is the world. And if that is the world, what can we do about it? So how can we keep the ball in our court so we're not depending on somebody following up with us, we can follow up with them?
Well, let's get back to your book. What are the basic premise of your book? And in a few short words, explain to our audience. We're talking with Martyn Lewis. He's got a wonderful new book out here. It's called How Customers Buy and Why They Don't. And so, Martyn, I'd like to, and by the way, we spell Martyn. I love it, Martyn. If I ever had children, I would name Martyn that way. But anyway, Martyn, what is the premise of your book, and what are some of the takeaways you'd like your readers to come away with?
The bottom line is to move beyond thinking about why somebody should buy your offering. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably passionate, and you should be passionate about what your offering is. And you're out there and you're saying that you see the market and it's kind of, gosh, if they invest $8 in my offering, they will get $20. This is going to create revenue for them. It's going to save them money. And I hear that expression, only a fool wouldn't buy it because it's logical. We can show how this is going to create value for our customers. Well, we've got to move beyond that because the world is full of fools. The world is full of people that turn down good offers like that every day for understandable reasons. So they understand your product. And we talk about it solving the wrong problem. Sometimes when customers aren't buying, that we think it's because they don't understand what we're offering and they don't see the value of it. They do. They do understand it. And so that is not the issue. We've got to move beyond the why would they buy to the how are they going to buy and why would they not buy. So the big takeaway is to come off the idea of looking at why somebody should buy. Of course, that's important. It's the starting point. If you don't create value for your customer, nobody's going to buy. But that's the starting point. Move beyond that and look at how would they buy and why they may not buy. And that's where the secret lies in my mind, and that's what the book's about.
Could you explain, go a little deeper on that? It's very interesting, but I think our audience would like to hear a little bit more about this.
Let's go deeper. So how do people buy? So we have what we call 6 strands of DNA to decode a buying journey. I'll go through them quickly, but these are the things we want to understand. The first one is trigger. What's going to trigger a buying journey? Why would somebody actually buy? Now, there's window shopping and there's interest, and people will spend time educating themselves about particular offerings. They'll be interested in particular offerings, but they're not really committed to a buying journey. So the first question to answer is, what is it that would actually, what we call, trigger a buying journey? What will start somebody into a buying journey? That doesn't mean they're going to buy, but there is a serious intent to explore something for possible acquisition. So triggers is the first thing. Second one is steps. What are they going to go through? What's going to happen? They want to go and test it, trial it? They want to do a test run of something? Are they going to want to talk to other users, other customers? So what are they going to do as they go through their buying journey? And that buying journey could be a few hours. It could even be a few minutes, or it could be days, weeks, months even. So what are they going to do? What's going to go on in their mind? If they are buying a mobile phone, for instance, are they going to compare it to others? Are they going to look for particular features? Are they going to look at the pricing? Are they going to look at where they can buy it? So what are the steps they're going to go through? Third of the 6 things is players. Who's going to get involved? Is it a singular person? It rarely is. Today, decisions, especially in the corporate world, involve many people. More people than ever before get involved when somebody's looking to acquire something. Even something simple, people will get involved. Purchasing organization may get involved. IT people may get involved. Managers may get involved. Subject matter experts may get involved. So who's going to get involved in that buying journey and when? Then we look at what we call the buying style. So briefly, we look at, do they believe they have choice? Do they believe they could go to any one of a number of suppliers, or would they view a particular supplier or brand as unique? So how do they make their decision? Is it one where it's kind of term commodity, or do they see something about a particular brand that would cause them to buy that way? The second aspect of buying style is, do they know what they want, or are they looking for help? So do they approach their buying decision saying, I know exactly what I want? Or do they say, wow, I need a new mobile phone. I'm not sure if I need a camera. I'm not sure about this. I need somebody to talk this through with. I need to go maybe try some things. I need help in buying. So that's buying style. Value drivers, maybe one of the simplest. The fifth of the 6th is, what are they looking for? What do they hope to get at the end of the day? So what's their pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? And then the 6th area to understand, and I think probably the most misunderstood and the one that we really need to emphasize, is what we call buying concerns. What are going to be the anxieties? What are going to be the issues that come up? What's going to get in the way of them saying yes? So as they go through their buying journey, are they going to get overwhelmed by options and just grind into the ground? Are they going to say, well, this is very nice, but what I'm doing today is good enough? So yes, this is better, but what I'm doing today is good enough, and I'm happy to stay with status quo because I've got enough going on in my life as it is. I don't need to make this change. So the 6th area is buying concerns. So those are the 6 areas we look at, and we say that this is what you really have to understand. What will trigger a buying journey? What's going to happen? What are people going to do? Who gets involved? The overall style and how they approach their decision, the motivation, the value drivers, and the buying concerns.
Wow, that's neat. I imagine I'm sitting here a little bit overwhelmed because it's so clear. But But now, having said all that, how do you imbue that into a sales organization?
It's very simple. We say that the role of sales and marketing today, in today's world, the role of sales and marketing is to manage the buying journey. Now, who knows what the role was in the past? In many ways, it was to position the products with the customer, educate the customer, show the value, and then take the order. Today, we're saying, no, the singular role of sales and marketing is to manage that buying journey, to understand where the customer is in that buying journey. If they're not in the buying journey, how do you get them into one or abandon them? And then how do you manage them through the various activities that they will go through, making sure that they see the value and taking away the friction. So the role of sales and marketing is to manage the customer through their buying journey, starting with understanding where they are.
Well, without going into too much detail, I was always thought there were various types of sales: the consultative sale, the pricing sale, etc. How do you blend these together into your concept?
You're so right, and the consultative sale will go to what we call the buying style. So if the customer is looking for help, if they expect the salesperson to bring knowledge to the equation, then that is that resonates. You need a consultative sell there. But then if the customer believes they know what they want, the consultative sell really is not the way to go. So if I wanted to if I'd had a burning burrito the night before and I've got heartburn, I just want to rush into the store and pick up some antacid, some Tums or whatever. I don't want somebody to be there to start consulting with me over what I need. That would just get in the way and take time. So it goes back to how customers are buying. If customers are looking for help, the consultative style is exactly correct. If customers perceive they know what they want, then the consultative style really gets in the way. And that's a really interesting thing to look at. So yes, you're right. There absolutely are different types of selling approaches, and you harmonize that, in my mind, for how the customer is buying or how you'd like the customer to buy.
Well, let me ask you a question. I seem to be running into a lot of younger salespeople who call me on the phone, start with a script, and then when I ask a simple question that's out of the script, they seem to be at a loss. But it seems to me a lot of sales today are being scripted sales rather than something that what I call an interchange sale. What do you say to that?
I think you're exactly right. I think sales is probably one of the most misunderstood functions you could ever get to. That people just, because they believe it's all about presenting the product, educating the customer, and showing the value, and then taking the order, sales is so underrated and undermanaged. So yes, what you're describing, I see all the time. It's bad selling. It's bad selling. You may as well, in my mind, take your money to Vegas and gamble it, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're hiring often a lot of cheap salespeople, giving them not very effective scripts, and hoping that if they place enough bets, some of them will come in. Now, having said that, at the other end of the scale, I was talking just yesterday to a colleague of mine who's doing a lot of work in artificial intelligence. And gosh, if you can bring artificial intelligence to the equation, so somebody's talking, having an authentic conversation with you, and the artificial intelligence can prompt and say, well, this would be a good topic to go to next. That can be very, very useful. So I don't want to say that scripting and that type of approach is always ineffective. I think it largely is, but if you're using more intelligence and more precision around it, then I think it could be effective. But you're so right. Those scripts, the emails that arrive every day, they are really, it's like, to me, it's a random thing. They're making lots of calls, putting out lots of emails, hoping that somewhere they hit a target. To me, that's not what I would subscribe to as good sales and marketing.
We're talking with Martyn Lewis. He's got a wonderful book, How Customers Buy and Why They Don't. Martyn, in the short time we have left, we were talking before we went on the air, and you said you were a survivor of the Sonoma Valley fire. Tell us a little bit about your experience and what you're doing as a result of that.
Absolutely, Don. Well, yes, my life changed October the 9th of last year, where my wife and I went to bed at our home that we'd lived in for 17 years, and we could smell smoke, but that's not unusual when you live in Northern California. So we checked at 10:30 at night, and there were no fires. We were not in imminent danger. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, the police were breaking down our door and pulling us out of a burning home. And we had to leave. We grabbed our dog. The two of us got out. I didn't even have shoes on. And our house was burnt within minutes by a 3,000-degree fire. And to give you some idea what that is like, I had a pool table with a slate bed. And when we got back to the house 2 weeks later to look at the remains, I thought, where's the slate? And the engineer I was with said that would have vaporized. So our entire house and all our belongings just became ash, which is quite the experience. Now, I'm fortunate that I've got friends, I've got the means. We've picked up our life. We're actually looking at buying a house very close to where we were and going home, which is great. But there's a lot of people. 5,400 homes were destroyed. 24 people lost their lives. There's a lot of people less fortunate than my wife and I. So we're doing what we can for the community, and as such, I'm dedicating 100% of all pre-orders and first week order of the book to the Sonoma Resilience Fund, and then thereafter 25% of all the royalties of the book will go to the Sonoma Resilience Fund to help people, like I said, that are less fortunate and were caught in this incredible tragedy. And it certainly heightened my sensitivity and awareness of this type of thing.
We're talking with Martyn Lewis, whose new book is How Customers Buy and Why They Don't. Martyn, how can people buy the book, talk to you, all the good stuff?
Very simple. Amazon has the book now. It's as you say, How Customers Buy and Why They Don't by Martyn R. Lewis. I can be reached at mlewis, one word, M-L-E-W-I-S, at market-partners.com, which I love to hear from people, so please let me know your thoughts, comments. And we're about to have a website launch, which is buyingjourneydna.com. So buyingjourneydna.com.
Martyn, I'm going to interrupt you. Martyn, you're talking too fast. Will you spell out your websites for our audience, please?
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Let's take that a little slower then. Our website that's about to come up will be buyingjourneydna.com. So that's buyingjourneydna. All one word, no dots, no dashes, buyingjourneydna.com. And that will come up later this week. It's got details of the book, how you can buy it, the donations we're making to charity, and it's got a lot of blogs and articles about the whole topic of how customers buy and why they don't.
Thank you. We have been talking with Martyn Lewis and his book, How Customers Buy and Why They Don't. A link to his website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this show and every past and future Recalculating show. We are also happy to tell our listeners Recalculating Radio is now on iTunes as well. And you can also tell us guests you might want to hear by taking the brief survey on the website. Martyn, again, thank you so much for being with us.
Don, it's my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to share what I'm passionate about.
Well, that's what we want on this program, passion.
Love it.
Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.
Tell me, Dan, tell me about your latest book.
My current book that's coming out, I should say, is Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? And it's really the first book written for children between the ages of 9 and 12 and their families, dealing with dementia. Dementia is a growing problem with the elderly in the United States and around the world, and we are not very well informed about what's going on, what's happening. So I wrote this book in the form of a mystery. And I have two little girls, 9 and 12, who have a magical power to seem to be able to find things that are lost. And so they go to their dads and moms and they say, we work all over the neighborhood helping people find things, and we seem to find things. And their dad says, yes, you have a magical talent to do that. And they said, we'd like to start a business to see if we can help other people. So they decided to start a business. The two girls' names are Hudson and Charlotte. And they start H&C's Lost and Found. If you've lost it, we find it. And so they build a business, and they convince the dads to build them an office and a treehouse in the backyard. And they get busy making posters and flyers trying to get customers. And their dads take them downtown, and they put them in the windows and on the telephone poles and light poles. And they go home, and first week goes by, and nobody comes. And the second week and third week, and nobody comes. They're really, really dejected. And the fourth week comes, and there's a knock at the door. And they walk over and open the door, and there's a young man standing there with one of their flyers in his hands. And he says to them, my dad says the reason why my Grammy can't remember me is because she's lost her memory. And your flyer says you find things that are lost. Can you find my Grammy's memory? Well, they don't know anything about memory. So they take his name and they go see their dads to see what can happen. And the story evolves into how they learn about what dementia is and what's going on in the body when somebody has dementia. And then they decide, while they can't find their customer's memory, they can help him build the tools to retain her in his memory. And so at the end of the book, there are about 10 to 12, 13 things that families can do together to work on to preserve the memory of Grandma and Grandpa, so the generations can know who these people were. And that's the story.
What a great book. When will it be available, and how can people get it?
Well, it'll be available on Amazon.com. A lot of people who have read it, who've had moms and dads that have been stricken with Alzheimer's or dementia, tell me that they really now begin to understand what's happening in Grandma's brain. And we took a different approach. Rather than do the typical brain cross-section, I work with the artist, and we design highways in the brain. And there's a brain of one of the little girls and the brain of Grammy. They both have highways, roads, but the girl's brain, everything is green and go. Grammy's brain is full of no left turns, do not enter, stop, no right turns. So all of the messages that need to come from our brain get screwed up, and we can't function. Great illustrations, though. Wonderful illustrations.
Well, say goodbye, Dan.
All right.
Time for us to go.
Thank you for joining us. And by the way, if you didn't hear all of today's show, you can go to recalculating.biz, and you can pick up this show and past shows to expand your knowledge as becoming more successful entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
We've been asked recently by a number of people, how can they listen to past shows? And if you go to recalculating.biz, you'll find a link to iHeartRadio, which will allow you to go back and listen to shows that you didn't get a chance to finish or never heard. So we encourage you to go there, recalculating.biz.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.